First Lady Melania Trump was in New York City for previously scheduled meetings when the attack happened. She posted to Twitter that her heart breaks for the city. President Trump also reacted through Twitter and the White House press office. In his official statement, the president offered his thoughts and prayers to the victims and their families. He pledged his administration's full support to the NYPD through a joint investigation with the FBI. He also thanked the first responders. On Twitter, he initially posted, quote, "In NYC looks like another attack by a very sick and deranged person. Law enforcement is following this closely, not in the USA." He also said, quote, "We must not allow ISIS to return or enter our country after defeating them in the Middle East and elsewhere. Enough." Then 3 hours later, around 9:30 last night, came this tweet, quote, "I've just ordered Homeland Security to step up our already extreme vetting program. Being politically correct is fine, but not for this." Joe?
Yeah, Julie Pace, of course, here's another example of another attack that Donald Trump tries to fit in his, what he calls his extreme vetting program that could stop an attack. Now he's president. He's been president for, 9-10 months. This happened anyway because this will happen on any president's watch. If somebody has a truck in a city of 8 million people and decides to run up sidewalks. So talk about this suspect came here 7 years ago, right? And obviously, regardless of what vetting process Donald Trump had the way, this would not have stopped this particular attacker, would it?
This is one of the realities that we're dealing with right now, is that you can put in so-called extreme vetting, as the president says. You can ban entry from certain countries for 6 months, a year, but you're never going to be able to put in all of the safeguards that would prevent someone who could pass all of those screens, comes to the U.S., is either radicalized here, inspired here, is acting completely on their own. And so we see the president using extreme vetting, trying to take this tough stand after these attacks. But one of the things that he has to grapple with, like President Obama had to grapple with, is there may not be anything you can do to prevent what we saw last night. And that's a really difficult thing for a president to say to the country, is that we will be vigilant, we will put all the safeguards in place, but this, to some extent, is a reality that we have to deal with as Americans.
Well, you remember, Mika, this last summer when we were in London right after the spate of attacks there. We looked at everywhere we went, looked at the thousands and thousands of tourists of people right up to, busy roads, and both said to each other, there's only so much that London can do. There's only so much that Britain can do. There's only so much that New York can do. All it takes is a madman or an idiot who decides he or she wants to go up on a sidewalk. So Donald Trump, it's very interesting. Donald Trump is very critical of the mayor of London and did not offer condolences when London needed them during their recent spate of attacks. I thought it very interesting that immediately after the attacks yesterday, the mayor of London sent his best wishes from the entire city to the people of New York. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching. Let's bring in now Adam Schiff. He is, of course, the ranking member of the House Intel Committee. Congressman, let's begin with your reaction to what happened in New York City.
Well, horrified, I think, like everyone else. And we look in these early hours to try to figure out, was there something that we missed, something that friends or family or others saw? Were they in the system? What can we tell from any electronics that have been seized? And, of course, most important in the early hours, is there anyone else out there? I was briefed last night. As of last night, we weren't aware of there being other potential suspects out there, but that obviously has to be the initial priority.
Do you suspect the fall of Raqqa and the collapse of ISIS's so-called caliphate, do you suspect that is what's inspiring some of these attacks? And should we expect an increase of attacks across the world because of their failure on the battlefield?
I think you have to expect that now that the physical caliphate is disappearing and the capital, Raqqa, has fallen, they're going to seek other ways to lash out, to send a message that they're still quite lethal. So in some sense, yes, I think you're going to see more attacks around the world. All that being said, the fall of Raqqa and the defeat of this space in Syria and Iraq is very important to ultimately defeating ISIS. because you take away a lot of the ability to gather resources, to tax people, to collect oil income. You take away the sanctuary in which they can plot and plan. So it was a necessary step, but not sufficient to put an end to them. But we are going to have to be ever more vigilant for these kind of virtually inspired attacks online. We still, I think, don't know enough, Joe, about this particular attacker to see, okay, was there something that we missed in the vetting when they came to the country? No, that was years ago. Were they radicalized here? Who were they associating with? Was there any kind of command and control by ISIS, or was this someone simply acting out on their own? It's still, I think, far too early to say.
Congressman, the President of the United States tweeted late last night that they're going to uptick the extreme vetting, get back to that, and more enhanced extreme vetting in his tweet. I've just ordered Homeland Security to step up our already extreme vetting program, he tweeted. So let me ask you, as a member of the Intelligence Committee, having met with many members of the intelligence community in closed-door sessions, is there any way that extreme vetting can get to someone who's been here 7 years and vet the internet as he sits in an apartment in Paterson, New Jersey, reading social media?
Well, I don't think so. You know, there is some chance here that the person could have been radicalized 8 years ago, therefore before he came to this country.
He came with a green card.
It's far more likely, given the passage of time between his immigration here and the attack, that he was radicalized while he was here. And how that happened and why that happened, I'm sure we'll learn a great deal about. But it's hard to see, particularly when some of the folks, like those that were involved in the Boston Marathon bombing, came here as young people or as children or as early teenagers. It's hard to see how you can vet against that. Or people that are second generation, how do you vet for the next generation? Obviously, you can't. So there are limits to that. You know, I understand the president wants to say something, that he's taking some action. But it's really too early to say. Does this mean that we're going to now add Uzbekistan onto the list? Is that how we're going to conduct our policy in terms of who can come to the country or not? I think we ought to dispassionately look at what happened here, what are the facts, and what are the policy implications. But it's so early. I think it's very hazardous to draw conclusions at this point.
It is so early, but the president is up this morning drawing conclusions already. President Trump just tweeted, "The terrorists came into our country through what is called the Diversity Visa Lottery Program, a Chuck Schumer beauty. I want merit-based." Julie Pace, obviously, this is the president already casting blame for what happened and constantly suggesting that all problems that are happening in America are happening because of immigrants. He launched his campaign saying Mexicans were rapists and murderers and everything else. And of course, 6 months later in his campaign, he said he wanted to ban every Muslim from coming into this country. And now he's once again suggesting a visa program was responsible for this killing.
This has become the pattern for President Trump dating back to the campaign. No matter where an attack happens around the world, whether it's in the United States, in Europe, he immediately goes to questions about immigration, questions about foreigners coming into the United States. This shift that we've seen here with focusing on merit-based immigration now is tying into a debate that's happening on Capitol Hill. Senator Tom Cotton, some others have been pushing for this idea that we actually switch our legal immigration system to focus more on merit as opposed to family connections, some of the other standards that we currently use. Congressman Schiff, I'm curious if you have been briefed on this diversity lottery program and that being the potential way that this suspect came into the United States, and if you know anything about the vetting behind that program.
You know, the briefing I had last night from the FBI, we were still, I think, gathering some of the very earliest facts. At that time, we knew where this person was coming from. We knew that he was a green card holder, but didn't know much more about that. So, no, I haven't gotten any kind of specific new information in terms of the diversity program, but I think it's kind of absurd in the hours after this terrible attack to be using it as a fulcrum for a debate that has been going on in Congress for completely different reasons. There are legitimate reasons to look at how much should we take immigration, new immigrants on the basis of diversity, how much on the basis of merit. There are lots of considerations there. I've never really heard this made as a security argument, and I think to use this tragedy in that way to push a different agenda is not what the president ought to be doing right now.
Well, the president obviously, Congressman, has other distractions. I'm curious what you thought about the latest developments and what we learned about Paul Manafort yesterday.
Well, I think the indictments, as well as the guilty plea by Papadopoulos, are very significant. Here, the campaign manager, a central figure in the presidential campaign, was laundering money for years and continued to launder money, apparently, while he was the campaign chief. And one of the things I find most significant is emails that the Washington Post reported some time ago, and I can only talk about the public reports, that Manafort, while campaign chair, was reaching out to those same oligarchs like Oleg Deripaska that were funneling money to him that he was laundering while doing work in Ukraine. He was reaching out to them during the campaign, offering information about his own campaign, the Trump campaign, in an effort to try to collect more of the same kind of money he was laundering. So this was going on during the campaign. The Papadopoulos stuff is also very serious because yet another Trump campaign person lying about their contacts with Russia. And here, the campaign effectively notified as early as April, before the country knew about this, that Russia had possession of thousands of stolen Hillary Clinton emails and wanted some kind of cooperative relationship with the campaign. It certainly looks like there was an offer of help, and at Trump Tower, it certainly looks like there was an acceptance of help.
Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Still ahead, in the wake of yesterday's terror attack, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo tweeted this photo of the Freedom Tower, writing, "New York is an international symbol of freedom and democracy, and we will not be deterred." The governor joins the conversation next on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.